Excellent.
How about you guys?
Same here. Just I've been trying to stay outside because the weather's nice and very mild fall day over here in Clearwater, Buffalo.
Yes, it's unusually mild here in the UK as well. I guess climate change. Let's not get into that, but yeah, it's unseasonably warm, but I've been making the most of it as well, doing some treatment on some wood buildings and stuff. So yeah,
That's pretty good. Yeah, no, it's fall now, right? The autumn. So yeah, it should be a lot colder in some ways, but I'm actually really happy because it was like 22 degrees. So I guess that's like high 60s, I guess. So it was really, really good today. But yeah, pretty nice.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
Just so everyone knows, Julie couldn't be here today, and then Steve will probably jump in a little bit.
Cool.
I'm sure it will.
Yeah, shall we begin?
Yeah, sure. So let's start. So today we're gonna do our, let's see, my presentation is on the history of the Hungarian language. And Hungarian is a really weird language. It's very strange. And this is why it's kind of a good topic of discussion on the history of it and where it came from, and how did it get to Europe, and why is it so different? And so yeah, because we're language nerds here, and eventually I will also do a presentation on Romanian, which is also quite different, but is at least related to other languages in the area, and so on. But yeah, it's very strange. Anyway, so because I've been living here for 2 years and I've been studying Hungarian for 3.5 years, I just thought it would be nice to go through sort of some of the history steps. And again, because we are language nerds as much as we are other nerds when it comes to sci-fi and theology and philosophy and all this kind of stuff. So I thought I would take a break from too much heavy stuff and go into history and a little bit of linguistics and so on. And then at the end of my presentation, I'm actually going to translate a sentence from English into Hungarian, and this will give all of us the example of the grammar, which is also very different. So Chad, if you want to put my slides up, because I don't know how to do that. I keep forgetting.
No worries.
I love that you said we're going to go from heavy stuff. Sorry, I just love that you said we're going to go from heavy stuff into Hungarian grammar.
Nice.
That's right. Yes, and it's very weird. It's going to be, that's the other thing. Yeah, it's going to be very heavy because Hungarian grammar, and I'm going to get into this, is much different from English grammar. And so it's going to kind of twist our brains a little bit into a different direction, which I think is actually good. And so you might think to yourself after this, like, you don't want to learn it, but I still think it's really cool. So yeah, so here's a brief history, of course, of the Hungarian language. And this, of course, is the flag of Hungary. It looks like the Italian flag, but it's in a different area. And we're going to start. Before I actually get into what Hungarian is, I have to get into what Hungarian is not. And the reason why I have to do that is because we're in a very peculiar and very special little place in the world, and we are surrounded by neighbors that do not think, I shouldn't say do not think. Our neighbors do not speak a language that is similar to us, whereas all of our neighbors have one thing in common, okay? So I wanted to bring this map up here, and I know most people know their geography, so it's not a geography lesson. I know you know where Hungary is. If you don't, obviously it's in the middle of Central Europe. and we have a bunch of neighbors that have one thing in common. So if we go to the north, we get the country of Slovakia. And in Slovakia, their language, Slovak, is a Slavic language. And it's in the branch of what is called the West Slavic languages, and it's related most closely to Czech, but also a little bit distantly to Polish. Then if we go to the northeast, we have around, I guess it's like 60 or 80 mile border, I can't remember the exact number, with Ukraine. And of course, Ukraine is also a Slavic language, or Ukrainian, I should say, is a Slavic language. And not only is it a Slavic language, but it's part of the East Slavic branch. It is closely related to the Belarusian language in Belarus, and a little bit distantly related to Russian, even though, of course, they are two quite different languages. They don't understand each other. If we go to the south, you can see that there are three countries that border Hungary's south border. That, of course, is Serbia, Croatia, and Slovenia. So the languages of Serbian Croatian exist along what is called a dialect continuum, which is often called Serbo-Croatian. And it also includes Bosnian and Montenegrin, which means that spoken language-wise, they're very similar. However, because of national, religious, and even alphabet differences, they are considered different languages. But all of those languages, Serbian, Croatian, and Slovenian, are part of the South Slavic branch. When we head to the east, we find Romania. Very interesting language, Romanian. As I said, I can get into that later. But Romanian is a Romance language, which means that it evolved from Latin. And there are two branches within Romance. Romanian is a part of the Eastern Romance branch, but you may remember, or you may know, some Western Romance languages, which include French, Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, and other regional languages like Catalan, Sardinian, Ladin, Friulian, Romansh, and many others. So it is closely and closest related to English in some ways. And then, of course, to the west, we have Austria. Now, of course, in Austria, they speak German, but they have their own standardized version of German. And that standardized version of German is its own thing called Austrian German, but it, of course, is called a Germanic language, and the branch is called West Germanic language. So along with the standardized German in Switzerland, in Germany, including Dutch and English, we are all what are called West Germanic languages. So what do they all have in common? Well, all of these languages do have one thing in common. Now, they're very different. Of course, the Slavic languages have some what is called mutual intelligibility, which means that when somebody speaks Ukrainian, it's actually possible for someone who speaks Slovenian to understand it at some level. Of course, Serbian Croatian is quite mutually intelligible. But beyond that, they actually have something that goes back, like a common feature that goes back thousands of years. So all of those languages that I just mentioned, the Slavic languages, the Romance languages, and the Germanic languages, have this in common. So all of them are part of the same language family. Okay? And this language family, that also includes English, is called the Indo-European language family. The Indo-European language family is estimated to be around somewhere between 6,000 and 6,500 years ago. And it most likely originated somewhere north of Crimea in parts of Ukraine, Russia, and Belarus. And then you can see from all these different colors that those different groups migrated. But there was one language, and that one language was called Proto-Indo-European. It has been partially constructed by scholars. And what's also very interesting is, although I know it can be a little hard to see, but if you think about it, back in the 19th century, when scholars were heavily interested in finding the origins of languages, a bunch of scholars in Europe found that the language of Lithuanian, which of course is in the Baltics, okay, and has been spoken in the Baltics for roughly 5,000 years, that they had very similar sounds and what are called cognates, meaning that they're words that were very similar in origin and similar sounding to ancient Sanskrit. And this is really where the idea of these languages having one common ancestor were discovered and theorized. And obviously, even Darwin and evolution contributed to this in an indirect way. So if we look at this map of all the Indo-European languages, we see the green, I mentioned before, are the Slavic languages. The dark blue is, of course, the Romance languages, and you will see geographically that Romania and Moldova are quite separate from the other blue languages in the Western Europe. But then I also mentioned the red languages, which are Germanic languages, and not only did they include German and Dutch and English, but they also include the Scandinavian languages. So Icelandic, Norwegian, Danish, and Swedish are called North Germanic languages. They basically descend from the Nordic languages, the languages of the Vikings and so forth. But there are many other colors, depending on how large, of course, you can see here. If we go to Great Britain or go to the UK, we can see Ireland and Scotland, and there's even a part in northern France that's orange. And these, of course, are the Celtic languages. Some Celtic languages include Irish Gaelic, Scottish Gaelic, Manx, Cornish, Welsh, and then in France, they speak Breton in a place called Brittany, and Breton descends from a group of people that moved from Britannia during the Roman days, and they were there in Brittany. They moved. They were the Britons. Okay, so Celtic languages are also Indo-European languages. If we continue and we continue going to Southern Europe, you'll see that there are some other colors. Okay, the first color I want you to notice is the light blue color in the Balkans. This light blue color is the Albanian language. Albanian is its own branch of the Indo-European languages. It evolved from an Indo-European language, but today it's separated from the others. So it's not considered a Slavic language, for example. And Albania is spoken not just in Albania, but also parts of Montenegro, Kosovo, and North Macedonia. And just a few months ago, I went back to Skopje, Macedonia, where there are a lot of Albanian speakers, and I was able to hear people speak Albanian. Go further south, we'll see a yellow color, and that yellow color is Greek. Okay, the Greek languages evolved from what's called Hellenic languages. And of course, most Greeks are spoken in Greece today, but there are minority communities even in Turkey and all around the world. And they again evolved from their own branch, which is called Hellenic. If we look at the Caucasus, which is in between in southern Russia, in between the green color and the brown color, you might see a purple color. The purple represents the language of Armenian, which is also spoken in its neighboring countries of Georgia and Azerbaijan. Armenia is a very old language, and again, it is Indo-European, and it makes up its own branch. Then once we get to the brown color, you'll see that it goes all the way through from Turkey all the way to Bangladesh. And so if we're looking at the western side, we have languages like Kurdish, which is an Iranian language spoken in Turkey, Syria, and parts of Iraq. When we get into Iran, we have Persian, and Persian comes in three forms. One is Farsi, which is spoken in Iran. Go next door to Afghanistan, and they speak a language called Dari. And then in the former Soviet Republic of Tajikistan, they speak Tajik. And these three languages are considered Persian. In Afghanistan, they also speak a language called Pashto, Between Iran and Pakistan, there's another language called Baluchi. In Pakistan, as well as in northern India, this is where we get to what are called the Indo-Aryan languages. And these are the languages that evolved from Sanskrit. So Urdu is the official language of Pakistan. Hindi is spoken in India, but there are many other languages, including Gujarati, Punjabi, and I believe it's called Marathi is a part of it. In Nepal, they speak Nepalese. In Sri Lanka, they speak a language called Sinhalese. And then in Bangladesh, they speak Bengali, as well as they also speak Bengali in West Bengal, which is part of India. There's also another language called Assamese, which is spoken in the north part of Bangladesh and parts of India. So all in all, this is a massive, massive group of languages. And we have, everything from Icelandic to Sinhalese and Portuguese to Tajik. Now, they're all very different. It doesn't mean that if we speak one, we can understand another one. However, they all have this common ancestor, this Proto-Indo-European language that started somewhere in parts of Ukraine, Russia, and Belarus, and then migrated. And so it's a very, very interesting thing because of a history and, of course, of colonialism and other factors. People mostly speak English around the world. French is spoken by hundreds of millions of people. Spanish, of course, Portuguese, German, etc. So most of the world's languages, especially very popular languages, again, like the English, French, Spanish, at one time Dutch, German, Italian also is spoken outside of Italy too. And so many, many billions of people will speak an Indo-European language. Okay, so what does this have to do with Hungarian? Well, I need to make this point because if we look in Europe and we look at the country of Hungary, we could see that it's gray. Okay, why is it gray? Well, this is why it's gray. Because Hungarian is not an Indo-European language. Hungarian descends from a totally different language that was spoken somewhere between 6,500 and 7,000 years ago, called Protouralic, and its language family are called the Uralic languages. You can see here that there are a number of Uralic languages, in total somewhere around 35 to about 38 actual languages, and they're spoken by somewhere around 25 million people. Most of them are in Russia. But of course, Hungarian has 14 million speakers. So out of all the Uralic languages, Hungarian is the most popular. But then I negated to mention that Finnish and Estonian are also Uralic languages. I often get asked if I understand Finnish or Estonian. The answer is no. Finnish and Estonian are as far apart from each other as Hindi and English. They are very different, they are very difficult, and they evolved differently because roughly 5,000 years ago, that's when the Finnish languages and the Hungarian language started to depart. 5,000 years is a long time. But you can see here that there are a number of different languages. And I want to get into some of the branches just very quickly here. So if we look at Finnish, Estonian, and if we look north, we'll see a group of languages called Sami. These languages that are close to Finland, that are sort of all in this northwest corner, they're called the Balto-Finnic branch. Hungarian, and if we also look at the sort of center right part of our map, you can see that there is a light green color that's next to a yellow color. The light green is called Mansi, and the yellow is called Kanti. Well, Hungarian, Kanti, and Mansi are also part of their own branch, which is called Ugric. I have heard people online on YouTube speak these languages, and of course, I don't understand them, but we are considered to be cousins. If we look to the south, we get a group in Peach there called Komi, And everything that's below that are called Permian languages. And then pretty much all the rest in the north, especially around the Arctic Ocean, in the pink, in the other colors, like Selkirk and so forth, and especially up north, those are called the Samoyedics, which is actually also the name of a dog, if you know dog breeds. So we only have 4 branches, but of course we're all very different. And again, the whole point of this is to note that Hungarian did not, for example, evolve from Proto-Indo-European. It evolved from Proto-Uralic. And it is in and of itself a very different language, specifically in Central Europe, because of where it originated. So the next question always is, how did Hungarian go from what is today called Central Siberia, or West Siberia, I should say, which is technically a part of Asia, and then how did it get there into, what we call Central Europe? So this is a very approximate. This is obviously not something that is 100%, but there are some theories based on archaeological findings. But if we look at the first spot right there in our presentation, where it says spot number 1, this is the proposed homeland of Ugric speakers. I mentioned that term before, Ugrian or Ugric speakers. And these are the people like the Mansi and the Kanti. So we had to come from somewhere. So where did we go? Now, I know this is not a geographical map, but if it was, if you look at where the Ural Mountains are in Russia, this is around the southeastern part of it. So today it is in Russia, but there's also part of it in Kazakhstan, northern Kazakhstan. So what happened? Between the years 620 and 680, these are approximate years based on archaeological evidence, a group of people, which in Hungarian we call ourselves the Magyars, so the Magyar people, a Uralic speaking people, decided to leave the area. The best evidence is that we may have left due to climate changes that were destroying our farming and our animal husbandry. They were affecting it in negative ways. Could have been because it was colder, could have been because it was warmer. I can't exactly remember the specific reason. There also could have been bandits and other groups and tribes that were invading, Turkics especially, and Mongols. But for whatever reason, between the year 620 and 680, these Ugrian speakers, these Magyar people, decided to leave their homeland. They then migrated to spot number 2. And what's very interesting about spot number 2 is the very, very first people groups that the Magyars encountered were actually a group of Indo-Iranian speakers, Western Indo-Iranian speakers. So today, there are very few Western Iranian languages, one of which is called Ossetian. And the Ossetians are descendants from groups called the Sarmatians and especially the Scythians. And these people were called the Alans. There were a group of Scythians called the Alans. And so what happens is, of course, we get some words from these people. So for example, Hungarian, until we went to spot number 2, we never had a word for 100. So we get the word saz. And that word is an Iranian word. We also did not have, I should say, a word for 1,000. Our word is ezer. That again is an Iranian word. We also gained 2 words for colors from our Iranian speakers. Green, which in Hungarian is pronounced zöld, and gold, which is pronounced aran. So these words that we adapted actually do have an Indo-European etymology, and they come from these speakers. Finally, we decide to migrate even further west, okay? And we go to spot number 3. And in spot number 3, we encounter a group of Turkic speakers who are called the Khazars, sometimes called the Khazars. I'm not really sure how to pronounce it. I just say Khazars. Some people say Khazars. Regardless, they would have this large confederation where they had many different tribes, mostly Turkic tribes, live among them that were somewhat autonomous. And in spot number 3, we were able to become friends with a group of people that were at the time a Turkic group called the Bulgars. So they spoke a Turkic language at the time, and the Khazars spoke a Turkic language at the time. Now, of course, when the Turkic people encountered us, they thought we were Turkic speakers. Even though they didn't really understand our language, they surmised that we were probably Turkics. And so this is sort of where a lot of the misinformation about, oh, thank you, Joe, by the way, that's really cool. Saad and Hazard. Yeah, okay, exactly, yeah. I appreciate that very much. Yeah, that's really, really cool, actually. And yeah, in Farsi, right? But still, you can tell the
Yeah.
origins of the words. So these Turkic speakers, we got words. We got words for animals. We got words for more colors. Like we just got a ton more words from these Turkic speakers. So then what happened was, I think it may have been the Mongols or the Huns. I can't remember now. Probably the Huns were coming in from the east, and they displaced the Khazars. And so because the Magyars and the Bulgars were in the furthest western area of the Khazar Empire, we were able to leave. And with the Bulgars, we went to spot number 4, which is today called Etelköz, or what we call today Etelköz. And it's somewhere around the Ukrainian Moldovan border in an area sometimes called Transnistria. So we set up a settlement there. And again, we're with the Bulgars. Some Magyar tribes went their own way. Some Bulgar tribes kind of went their own way. But eventually there was then a command to go further west. Now, what was interesting about Etelköz is then we start to find more Indo-European speakers. There had actually been Germanic speakers, Romance speakers, and just starting to invade the area were Slavic speakers. So when we moved to spot number 5, which is a very famous thing, it's called the Carpathian Basin, the Bulgars decided to go south. They went to what is today Bulgaria. They converted to Christianity, and they changed their language to Bulgarian, which is a South Slavic language. However, the Magyars, we decided to go further into the Carpathian Basin. And so we split from the Bulgars peacefully, from what I remember reading, and we made our way into there. And that is where the year 895 and 896 come in. In 895, the Magyar people found a path between the Carpathian Mountains. They went through the Carpathian Mountains, which today would be Romania. They moved along Transylvania, and by 896, they made it basically to where I live today, right around Budapest, somewhere around here. And there had also been a Roman settlement here called Aquincum, and it was part of a province called Pannonia. So it had also been known because the Huns were here, and another group called the Avars were here, and the Franks were here. So many people were already in this area that there had been settlements here as well. So we get there into this area in 896. Now this is a modern painting. Okay, this looks like it could be something from 896, but it's not. This is a painting from the 19th century. And just pardon me, I just gotta get some water. Throat is getting dry. So this is a modern painting from the 19th century. And this is a gentleman. If you look in the photo, you will see that there are 2 men on white horses. The one to the right, which is closer to the center of the photo, with the bigger white horse, that is the depiction of a gentleman named Prince Arpad. And Arpad is a very common, very popular male name in Hungary, even to this day. So Prince Arpad united And if we look on his left or our right, we will see 6 men atop of 6 horses. Each of these people represent a different Hungarian or Magyar tribe. So when they got to the Carpathian Basins, Prince Arpad united 7 in total Hungarian tribes, went through the path, and went into Hungary. And this painting is housed, if you're ever in Budapest, in the Hungarian National Museum. And again, it's not something that you find from from the 10th or the 9th century. It's from the 19th. I also want to direct your attention to what's going on in the background. So on the far left and the far right, so the other gentleman on the far left with the white horse, and then on the far right, we see the nobility. So these were nobles. I also think it's very interesting that in the foreground at the bottom right of our photograph, we see a farmer, we see a peasant with a very specific form of bulls and cows. I don't know if those same looking cows are in Hungary today, but they're definitely their ancestors. They're, these ancestors of these cows, and they're a very specific kind of cow that came from Central Asia. So some of their descendants of those cows are still in Hungary today, and I just think it's a great cross reference or cross pattern of the different people groups. We have the chiefs, we have the nobility, and then we have the peasants and the farmers. All right, now to talk about the actual language. Okay, that was the history. So what's really interesting about language is every language that you will learn, okay, has an easy aspects and difficult aspects, even Hungarian. So here are a couple of easy aspects or easier aspects of the Hungarian language, especially if you know English or you might know, another, for example, language, okay? So the first one is there are no gendered nouns in Hungarian. Excuse me again. Okay, what does that mean? Well, many Romance languages, French, for example, which I learned in school, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, there are masculine nouns and feminine nouns. I also learned German. In German, there's masculine, feminine, and neutral. In Romanian, which I'm learning now, there's also masculine, feminine, and neutral, except in singular, masculine and neutral are the same, and in plural, feminine and neutral are the same. So there's basically only 2. Even though on paper there's 3. So in Hungarian, just like in English, every object is just the. There's no gender. There's no masculine or feminine. It's basically all neutral. So when we look at our nouns, you don't have to memorize, is it feminine, is it masculine, nothing like that. Another thing that I find very interesting is depending on the language, some languages emphasize syllables differently. Sometimes, if there's 5 syllables, you emphasize the 4th, or you might emphasize the 3rd. And in English, I don't really even think that there's too much of a rule. I don't even know, for example, what syllables I emphasize. But in Hungarian, the easiest thing, we always, always, always emphasize the first syllable of every word. Now, of course, if the word only has 1 syllable, we don't emphasize it. But if it has 2 or more, the first is always stressed, and that is the rule. So we don't have to think, okay, there's an even number of syllables or an odd number of syllables, and which very simple. The next one is verb tenses. I don't know if anyone out there speaks English as their second language, but if you do, you know that we have 13 verb tenses. This is the most difficult part of English for the majority of speakers. Especially those coming from other European languages. Romanian and German, they have 5 verb tenses. And that's fairly average for Europe. However, there's only 3 in Hungarian, and this is great. So we only have past simple, present simple, and future simple. So I was, I am, I will. In German, and in Romanian, there's also past and present perfect. So those can be a little bit tricky. I know when I speak Romanian, I don't even use the perfect tense. And there are areas of Romania where people don't even use the perfect tense. So it's interesting. So you only have to use, those three tenses. So that tends to be good. The other thing is, if you're like me and you hate the English alphabet, as it hasn't been updated in hundreds of years, and I'm not a good reader when it comes to English. In Hungarian, it's pretty much like 95% phonetic. So if you're reading a book and you're reading words, we have accents on top of vowels. We have, consonant combinations that are pretty straightforward. So we have an incredibly phonetic alphabet. Are there exceptions? Of course. Absolutely, there are. We have a tense in Hungarian, which we do have in English and other languages. It's called imperative tense. People would know that that means when I give an order. In Hungarian, we do not like to have three or more consonants together. We tend to be a language that has consonant, verb, or verb, consonant, but sometimes we have to stick 3 or 4 consonants together. Well, the good news is, if we stick 3 or 4 consonants together, we only make 2 consonant sounds. And so we have what are called voice assimilations. And there are actually rules for those voice assimilations. So when you learn them, they're not terribly difficult, and they only are a part of one tense. So we're not 100% phonetic, but we are for the most part. So that's the easy stuff. Let's get on to the hard stuff. Why is Hungarian so hard? This is a question I ask myself every day. Why is Hungarian so hard? Well, first of all, I'm going to give you all, at the end of this presentation, an example of what is called agglutinative grammar. The root of this word is to glue, and this will become apparent as the presentation goes along, especially in my last slide. So this kind of grammar, all right, in Hungarian, is very different from English. Because we are an Uralic language, it's also very different from other Indo-European languages. And again, I'll get into what that means in a moment. So if you think you know grammar, and if you think you know sentence structure, especially if you know a Germanic language or a Romance language or whatever, prepare to be kind of dazzled, in a sense, when I introduce Hungarian grammar to you. Next, the vocabulary is not like English. I know when I'm learning Romanian, I can look at certain words like dificile and, exact and so forth. There are certain words in Romanian, because they come from Latin, and because Romanian also has a lot of words from French and Italian, that when I look at them, and this also happens in French, although French pronunciation is different, and of course Romanian pronunciation is different, but I can look at those words like dificile, and I go, oh, it's difficult. Exact, oh, it's exact, right? In Hungarian, sure, we have those words like computer and auto and so forth, but really the overwhelming majority of our words are of a different etymology, because they can come from Turkic words, Iranian words, and of course, Uralic words. It is noted that around 20% of the vocabulary of Hungarian has a direct Uralic cognate. 30% of our vocabulary has literally no direct cognate in any other language. It's considered to be unknown and uncertain. The other, I think it's something like 70%, or excuse me, not 70, rather, 30%, I should say, maybe 30, 40% come from Indo-European languages, and the rest come from Turkic. So I actually want to say it's something like 30 unknown, 30 Indo-European, and then 20 Uralic and 20 Turkic. So you have to kind of relearn vocabulary, and it'll be very different. So the word for, I don't know, to rest is peahen. The word for book is kunf. These are very weird words. We have words like udul, and a circle is kud. It doesn't make any sense. And they all seem to be very like 2, 3, 4-letter words that are very archaic. In addition to that, there is a lot of conjugation. And I mean a lot of conjugation in Hungarian. I mentioned before that, of course, we have past simple, present simple, and future simple. But each verb in Hungarian can either be transitive or intransitive. If it's a transitive verb, it takes on movement. So then we also have 6 pronouns, and we have 6 individual words, and that is either past, present, or future. So 6 times 3 is 18. So in past, present, future, a word like to go, which I'm going to give you an example of conjugation-wise, that in past, present, and future, and I'm talking about I, you, he, she, it, we, and then we have you all, so you plural, and then we have they. So each of those pronouns have a conjugation. Times that by 3, we have 18, but here's the kicker. Verbs that don't take on movement are called intransitive verbs, and we have both a definite and an indefinite conjugation. So some verbs have up to 36 different forms of conjugations. That does not include the imperative clause, the conditional clause, and other clauses, which they themselves have either 18 or, in some cases, 30, well, usually not 36. It's usually 18 additional per clause, and it's very difficult. So in total, we have 18 cases as well. Now, these cases are not the same as German. They're not like the same as in the Slavic languages, but we do have a lot of suffixes. And I'll explain when we get into our last slide what that means as well. Because of agglutinative grammar, we use suffixes. So there are 18 forms of these that replace words like with, to, by, and for, just for an example. And if we have a noun, we can have up to 34 noun endings that would basically take the different position of, of what would be a preposition in English. So it's complicated. There's a lot to remember when you learn Hungarian, and it's a lot of looking at tables and charts that break down all of these things. And again, it's just very hard. And this is why it's considered one of the most difficult languages in the world to learn. Which brings me to my next slide. If we look at the difficulty of the Hungarian language, this is a chart by the Foreign Services Committee, or Foreign Services Institute, excuse me. And this is an American organization which trains diplomats, ambassadors, and other workers in consulates and embassies that are part of the United States to go abroad. And of course, wherever they're going, to whichever country, they have to learn the local language or the national language. And so this is a chart of languages for those who speak English as their first language. Different languages will have different charts like this, but this is if you speak English as a first language. So we can see here that the languages in red take around 24 weeks to become fluent, okay? And these are languages that are Germanic, except for Icelandic, because that's quite difficult. But Norwegian, Swedish, Danish, Dutch, French, Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, and of course, Romanian. They are considered the easiest languages for us to learn as English speakers. German is the next. It takes around 30 weeks. It's in category 2. Most, as you can see here, category 3, by the way, is for languages like Malay and Indonesian, so they're in Asia. But then there's also category 4, and you can look at category 4 and see most of the Slavic languages, Greek, Albanian, Turkish. However, we will also notice that it says 44 weeks to learn these languages. But if you look at Hungary's category, it's a category 4, okay? Except it has an asterisk because it takes longer. So Hungarian, Finnish, Estonian are just as difficult to learn than other languages like Thai, Vietnamese, Mongolian, and Swahili. And of course, the category 5 languages consist of Arabic, Japanese, Korean, Mandarin, and Cantonese. So while not the most difficult languages in the world, we are very close to the most difficult languages in the world. So it takes maybe, let's say, 60 plus hours to become fluent. And that's if you're learning the language, full time. And that's really, again, it's really difficult. I've been learning Hungarian for 3.5 years, and I'm somewhere between an upper intermediate and a lower advanced level. And it's taken me that long just to get to the advanced level. In that amount of time, I could be fully fluent in Romanian, I could be fully fluent in French or so forth. But of course, I chose Hungarian because it's very personal to me and I enjoy it. So the other thing to notice is that any language that you want to learn, if you have motivation, you will learn it. So even if you want to learn one of the most difficult languages in the world, like I have a friend who has spent 25 years learning Japanese, you can do it. So that's the number one thing is regardless of whether a language is easy or difficult or whatever, if you have some kind of passion, you can get through it. The next thing before I go on to the conjugation of the last slide is I wanted to show you some Hungarian communities outside of Hungary. I mentioned before that Hungarian is spoken by between 13 and 14 million people worldwide. Roughly, there are 9.7 million, maybe 9.8 million people that live in Hungary today. Most of those people, about 95% of those people, speak Hungarian as their first language. We also have a German community and we have communities of international people, but they're usually around 1%. Roma communities, for example, who speak another language, and they're usually around 1%. So usually Hungarian is spoken, let's say, maybe 9.5 million, 9.6 million people out of that 14. And then there are quite a few speakers that live in Slovakia. Although this graphic is a little bit older, it's about 20 years old now. I couldn't find a current one. Around 10, maybe 8 to 10% of Slovakia's population speak Hungarian. In Romania, it's actually now around 8% of people speak Hungarian. But we also have communities in Serbia in the north, in an area called Vojvodina, in Croatia along the border, and then of course also in Slovenia and Austria along the border. So in total, probably somewhere around 12 million speakers, maybe ish, 11, 12 million speakers speak Hungarian in Europe. And then, of course, there are significant hundreds of thousands of speakers that live in places like Canada, United States, Australia, Great Britain, Germany, New Zealand, and so forth. And that's called the diaspora because many Hungarians left to North America and the rest of the world around World War I and then World War II. And then, of course, in the 1956 revolution, 200,000 Hungarians left, including my family, as I mentioned a little while ago, and, moved to places like Canada. So what I want to do now is something really fun because we are going to translate a sentence. So I'm going to stop if you guys stop this, and I'm going to translate a sentence for you, and I'm going to introduce you to agglutinative grammar. And I don't know how it's going to, I have different reactions about this because it is difficult. But I do want to say, of course, I'll share my screen here, to not worry if for any reason that, you can't understand this, if it goes above your head, like it's totally okay. Because, like things happen and it is a very difficult concept. I'm just curious, am I sharing my screen? I should be. Do you see a slide here? Do you guys see a slide? PowerPoint slide?
I don't see anything. Do you, Chad?
No.
Oh, I was muted. It's let me see if I can put it in the thing if you want.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
it. Yeah.
Okay.
I know it might be a little small because I can't really do. Yeah, here we go. So it might be a little small, guys. I'm sorry about that. Full screen mode. Yeah, here we go. Perfect. Okay. So I'm going to translate this sentence from English to Hungarian. I'm going to introduce you to agglutinative grammar. And then at the end of this, I'm going to tell you the different languages that use agglutination. So first of all, I want you to understand that if any of this goes over your head, don't worry about it for a couple of different reasons. One is I'm introducing you to a totally different concept of grammar that many of you will be experiencing for the first time. So when we speak English, and if we also speak another Indo-European language or a language from whatever, we have just a certain structure, a sentence structure in our heads. And, that's what we know, and there's nothing wrong with that. So one of the reasons is when we go outside of that sentence structure, this is what it's going to look like, okay? And again, if it goes over your head, guys, don't worry. There's no quizzes, nothing, but I want to show you how we form our sentences in Hungarian. So the first thing is we have, with or without a contraction, right? We have, I am going up to my apartment. 7 words with a contraction, 6. I'm going to reduce this entire sentence by 50%. So I'm going to make this entire sentence in Hungarian in 3 words, okay? It will contain all of these words, except they will be condensed. So let's start. So first of all, we got to start in Hungarian with the verb. So the verb here, go. In Hungarian, go is going to be spelled like this. Excuse me, like this. Now this word in Hungarian is pronounced met. And that GY is a little funny. We call it a soft J. So a soft J. Now, if you can only think of it as the ja in jam or gem or something, don't worry about it. But if you want to pronounce it like Hungarian, we pronounce it J. So what we do is when we pronounce a ja like jam, you can see that we have our jaw and our tongue is at the bottom, and we sort of say ja, ja, like this, right? Very common. If you want to say J, you got to smile a little bit. You got to put your tongue, the tip of your tongue, in front of your front teeth or at the back of your front teeth, and you got to say the same sound, J, J. Anyway, just for a little practice, if you'd like to do that later, but if you can only think of it as ja, as jam, no worries. So, med. Well, I'm not done here because I have to put, I am. Now, one of the things about Hungarian is like many languages, we are called a pro-drop language. And pro-drop languages are languages where you don't always need to add the pronoun with a verb. Okay? So in this case, there is a pronoun for I in Hungarian, and that is pronounced ein. So like the word pain or gain, but you just take away the first consonant. But we don't need to have it here, because what we then can move on to is just the fact that I go, you go, and so forth. They're all different. All 6 of our go conjugations are different. So don't worry about it. However, if I want to conjugate I go or I am going, again, that's first person, singular, and we only have present simple, then all I need to do is put an E and a K. So right there, megyek either means I'm going, I go, or I am going. Pretty simple, okay? That's just where we're going to start off with. Now, we have the word up. This is where I'm going to introduce you to the agglutinative grammar. We're going to do something special with up. In Hungarian, when we have a verb and we want to add a direction. So this could be the same rule if we're using down, in, out, back, towards, away. Okay, doesn't matter what it is. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to add this direction as a prefix. I'm going to go right to the beginning of the word, this, and I'm going to add the word up. But I'm not going to separate the word. I'm going to glue the word up to the words for I am going. And I'm going to do it like this. Up in Hungarian is pronounced fel. Okay? When I say the word megyek, that just means I go, I'm going. But when I say felmegyek, I'm going up. This is one word. I understand that in English and in other languages, it's not, but this is how we do grammar. So I have glued words that otherwise would be separate in Indo-European languages. I have now glued them onto existing words, in this case a verb, and I've made that word longer. So this concept might be very strange. I completely understand. It might be completely different, but to be honest with you, when I was learning Hungarian, it's something that the human brain easily adapts to. When I was learning Hungarian a couple of years ago, when I first moved here, I was taking an intensive course, and there were people from all over the world in my classes. Eventually, your brain gets used to it. It's called neuroelasticity. So again, it's not impossible. It's just very different. So don't worry about this. Now we're going to move on to my apartment. And again, I'm going to use agglutinativeness in my agglutinative grammar. First rule that we have to learn about Hungarian is that we are an article-based language. So we do have articles for the, a, and an. In Hungarian, it's very similar to English, but it's also done in an opposite manner, and I'll explain what I mean. In English, of course, we know we have one word for the, two words for a and an. If we use the word a, then the next word is a consonant, begins with a consonant, and if it's an, the next is with a vowel. The same exact logic is in Hungarian, except it's reversed. In Hungarian, we have two forms of the. It's either a or oz. If it's a, the next word starts with a consonant. If it's oz, then the next starts with a vowel. And then we only have one word for a or an, which is pronounced ed. And that's also our word for one. Now, when we look at the sentence here, we have my apartment. When something has my apartment, it's definite. It's not an apartment. It's not indefinite. It's a definite object. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put a, because that basically is the. And then I'm going to give you the translation of the English translation of the word apartment. So here it is, apartment. Oops. Okay. The word for apartment in Hungarian is pronounced lakás. It sounds like the English word for law, sounds like the English word for cash. And again, we emphasize that first syllable, lakás. All right? That comes first in Hungarian. Why? Because when we have a noun, we agglutinate with suffixes. Verbs, we agglutinate with prefixes. Nouns, we agglutinate with suffixes. So what am I going to do with to and my? That's the missing thing. Well, this is what's interesting. We're going to work backwards. We're going to start with my, because in this case, how Hungarians agglutinate is that personal pronouns, when we agglutinate, are put in the first position before prepositions. All we have to do in this case is glue two letters, O and M. When I say the word a lakás, that just means the apartment. When I say a lakásom, it basically just means my apartment. And again, I have glued that word to the end as a suffix. Finally, we don't have prepositions, which means they don't come in a preposition. So the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add another two letters, which is B-A. That is the word for two. So altogether, I am going up to my apartment is pronounced felmegyek a lakásomba. If I say the English words in the Hungarian sentence structure, it's going to sound like a fictional character. Up, going I am, the apartment, my two. Maybe I sound like Yoda from Star Wars. I probably do, because whatever language Yoda speaks is agglutinative, but instead of using the standard grammar, nobody taught him how to do that. And so he simply speaks his own language, but nobody taught him how to do our sentence structure. And so all in all, this is how we say, I am going up to my apartment. The direction, the verb, which is then conjugated, the definite article, then the noun, followed by the personal pronoun, followed by the preposition. So if you can wrap your head around this, there are, and this is my final point, there are a number of agglutinative languages around the world, including, but not limited to Japanese, Korean, Mongolian, Manchurian, Tamil, Georgian, Swahili, Basque, the Turkic languages like Turkish, Azeri, Kazakh, etc. And then there's also many languages that are indigenous to North and South America, such as Algonquin, Cree, Blackfoot, Siouan, Navajo, and then in South America, in Central America, the Nahuatl language of the Aztecs is agglutinative, and in South America, the Quechua languages of the Inca, which is spoken in Peru and Bolivia. And then, in addition to that, other Uralic languages are also agglutinative. So that is all for the presentation. Thank you guys so much again. Hopefully it didn't go too long, but I'm very happy that I got to share this with you because it is kind of crazy, the Hungarian language. And I'm really happy that I introduced you guys to some agglutinative grammar. So just think of trying to, change your brain a little bit here. Hopefully I've done that. You might be thinking I'll never ever learn this language because it's too difficult. But I'm telling you, if you learn any of the other languages that I just mentioned, like you want to learn Mongolian or something, whatever, you want to learn an agglutinative language, your brain will adapt. It will happen. So thank you guys very, very much.
Thank you, Mark. That was great.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
It's interesting you were saying about Turkish. I was thinking the grammar reminded me of Turkish a lot.
So yeah, the Turkic languages. So Turkish, Azeri, Kazakh, Uzbek, Turkmen, and Tuvan, and all those, they are agglutinative. The thing is this: why Hungarian sort of looks like it's the opposite of English or German or whatever, especially sentence structure, it's probably because Hungarians have been speaking Hungarian for over 1,000 years in the same spot. And of course, they're next to the Germanic languages, they're next to the Slavic languages, and they're next to the Romance languages, like that. So there had to have been some borrowing. Like Hungarians speak German, Hungarians can speak all these different. So I think when Hungarian grammar was evolving, we were able to be like, oh, okay, well, to my apartment. So we're going to start with my, and we're going to put that over here. And then we're going to take to and put that over here. The trouble is with other agglutinative languages, if they evolve around other languages that are not Indo-European, then their agglutinative structure could be completely different. And so, for example, I don't even know how Finnish agglutinates. I don't know how Estonian agglutinates. Like, I don't know where they put their pronouns, I don't know. But I just know in Hungarian that if we have a personal pronoun, then that is the first thing we do. And then after that, of course, is the preposition in those cases. How Turkish does it, like how Mongolian does it, I'm very interested in knowing and learning, but it would be dramatically different in many ways to Hungarian. So in the future, I'd actually like to study probably something like Finnish, because of course they evolved around Swedish, they evolved around Russian, and then of course they evolved, Germans came in as well. The Germans had a lot of influence in Finland. And then of course the Baltic languages, and also Estonian. So they were part of Sweden, they were part of Germany, they were part of Russia, and of course they have Latvian influence. So it would be very interesting to know if they do the similar structures, but I just don't know. But I can imagine that, like, how people structure their own language is just kind of up to the other languages around them. So yeah, but it's quite fascinating, I think.
It definitely is.
Chad, is there any start questions?
Oh, shoot. I didn't even realize I should have been doing that since we don't.
Okay, no problem. So I have some questions on my channel. Maybe I'll go through those while you start something.
All right.
Yeah? All right. So, again, I've got my trusty laptop here because the text is too small.
Well, here's...
Okay, so...
Yeah.
That's a good one from Goldie.
Yes.
I didn't mean to interrupt you guys. So this one's from Goldie. Says you could help our Danielle Chamberlain raise funds for their aftermath for her birthday. But sorry, Joe, go ahead now.
No problem. So, question from Ezra Khayyam. Hopefully I pronounced that right. Would it be possible for the speaker, Mark, or someone from the audience to provide resources they find valuable on learning the language?
Ooh, okay. The easiest thing to do if you want to learn Hungarian is they have a Duolingo app on Duolingo. So you can go onto there. They just restructured it, so you don't have to pay anything. Like I subscribe to it. It's maybe $10 a month, but you don't have to. And so to me, that's a good place to start, because they have restructured it. They've gotten a very good speaker of Hungarian. But there's also something called Podcast 101. And they have these 101 type languages. And if you go onto Spotify, you can type Hungarian 101 and it will just start right from the beginning. So, and you can choose any other language that you're interested. Again, I speak Romanian, so they have an option there. They have an option of Romanian on Duolingo. They have the 101 options. So I would go for those two sources first. I'd be kind of wary a little bit because I tried to learn when I was a teenager and when I was in college with books. That can be difficult because they don't really explain the grammar too much. So I want to give another thing too. So going on to Duolingo is good. Going on to Podcast 101 is also good. But I have used a website called italki, which is a website if you want to learn a language. and they have online tutors, and you can see them for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, 60 minutes, whatever. And you can find people who speak any language across the world. You can meet one-on-one through Zoom or Skype or their own app on italki. And there's also one I think called Preply, which is another one. There's a whole bunch of these apps. So if you're going to learn a language like Hungarian, I think it's better to have a tutor, and a tutor who speaks Hungarian, because they will be able to break down the grammar for you, which books cannot do. But if you're just looking for some conversation, just to get some knowledge and whatever, then the podcasts and Duolingo is good. So it just depends on you and how much you want to learn. Whereas other languages, I got to be honest with you, like some languages, the grammar is just so easy that you could probably learn it on your own. But Hungarian is one of those things where your brain is going to be reconstructed. So you need someone to help you go through that, and especially someone to motivate you, because it's such a hard language. But yeah, thank you so much for that question. That's a really excellent question.
That's a really excellent answer. I'd second Duolingo as well, although they need to release a Farsi course. They really need to,
Yes.
but that's just me.
Yes. Yeah, and also Bulgarian and Macedonian I want to learn, and they don't have that one yet. So they do have Finnish, they have Turkish, French, Spanish. They also need Latin American Spanish. So yeah, there's a lot.
And they have Esperanto and High Valerian, but don't have
They have
Farsi.
Castilian,
Yeah.
Castilian
Anyway.
Spanish, which is their number one most used language, is Castilian Spanish, but they don't have Latin American, and then they don't have European Portuguese. They only have Brazilian Portuguese. So yeah, there's a few anyway. Serbian or something like that would be nice too.
That's a big factor in why my Portuguese is more Brazilian, which was not great in Lisbon, but I got around. Anyway, next question. What is the metric to evaluate fluency?
I'm sorry, say that again? I'm so sorry, Joe.
What is the metric to evaluate fluency?
Okay. The metric for the Foreign Services is that they have come up, Foreign Services Institute, is that they have come up with these courses, these programs, and in order to teach people these different languages. So they've been doing this for quite a long time. I think the Foreign Services Institute has been around. I mean, there's been however long there's been embassies around, so it's been a long time. So from what I understand, they've created their programs based upon the quote unquote easiness or of languages. So if you're going to go to be a consulate member and you're going to go to Spain, they know that they can teach it in 24 weeks, whereas others are just more difficult. And so from what I understand, it's mostly trial by error. And also the fact that they've just been doing it for a long time. Now, also remember that we're all an individual. And so when you learn a language, it can take 24 weeks to learn Spanish, but then they're going to Spain or they're going to Mexico or they're going to Uruguay. So then they're using that every day, whereas it might take people shorter or longer. So those are just all averages. But what I would say is that's how long their course is, because that's just, again, how they've been doing it for such a long time that they kind of know that if you speak English as a first language, that's how long they need to train you. That's about all, trial by error.
Very good.
Yeah, fair enough. Last thing, to the person in the chat who was asking about my channel because they couldn't find it, it's youtube.com/@JoeGiuseppe. That easy.
Yeah.
Over to you, Chad.
I was going to say, anyone in the chat ask any question about anything, including language, but anything, right?
Yeah, basically. And yeah, I have about 5 people on my channel I want to thank so much. Thank you, everybody. I'll see if there's anything scrolling down here. But got Broken Dishes on mine. We got Kareen C. Thank you. We have Lonesome Squirrel. we have Joni Cummings. So thanks everyone that are on there. So of course mine is youtube.com/JoeGiuseppe. /Mark, M-A-R-K-A Turi, all one word. And then you can also go, I would really love if someone could buy me a coffee. That would be nice. I have a little buy me a coffee website that you can go on. It's actually buy me a book is what it says. But if you could contribute to my reading list, that would be fun. Yeah, and any support that you can give. Watch hours, of course, whether it's monetary or not, but watch hours are great. I'm trying to build. I now have over 80 watch hours and I have over 400 views. So I'm slowly trying to build up to 500. And I thank so much for everyone who's watched my stuff. I clip things out, of course, and I release them during the week. But yeah, thank you guys. Thank you everyone in the community, everyone who's here. And yeah, I very much appreciate all your time and all your effort. And yeah, to keep watching us for watch hours. We all need it. And yes, appreciate it, of course.
Yeah, so there was also a question about pro-drop languages. So my understanding is that a pro-drop language is one where you can drop the pronouns. So Romance languages, in my experience, very commonly do this. And Farsi does this, but like German, for instance, cannot do this. English and German, you cannot do this. I just wanted to check, because I answered the question, because that was my understanding. I just wanted to check if that's yours as well.
For drop languages, yeah, again, Hungarian is pro-drop, and Romanian is also pro-drop. But absolutely, we cannot drop German, no, and English, no. And for German, it's, I think, because like they have two Z, they have Z and Z. And so it might get confusing because Z is also she and then Z is also they. Whereas in English,
different verb endings.
Of course. But yeah, but of course. But in English, the way that we conjugate is we only usually have two varieties. So if we conjugate, to go, it's just go and goes. That's all we have. And goes is only in third person singular. Everyone else is go. So it wouldn't make sense if we said, like, I don't know, go to the mall. Are we saying I'm going to the mall? What are we saying? Go to the mall. Was it in order? So in English, it makes sense that we have that we keep the personal pronouns. But like in Hungarian, like I said, I don't have to say én megyek. If I use the word én in that sentence, right? It's like really weird and it's like emphasized. Like if I were going to yell at someone, I am going up to my apartment, like really fierce, I might use the word aim, but it sounds weird and it sounds like someone's old. Like it just sounds strange. So in most modern language, especially in urban language, with younger generations, you just drop. You don't need to. And like in Romanian, you don't need to say, I is eu and then am is sunt, but you don't need to say eu sunt. You can just say sunt. Like it just, for younger people, it doesn't make sense when you use the pronoun. So it's just weird. It's just different culture, different thing. But yeah, Hungarian is pro-drop. German is not. And of course, German is a very strict language. But yeah, it's just, that's sort of just how it is because we have 6 varieties. So if I say megyek, you only know that I'm saying I don't need to say én megyek because it's just first person singular all the time. So, makes sense.
Yeah, cool.
Very good. You're right about that Hungarian being a difficult language. Wow.
Yeah. Blew Chad's mind, huh? That was my goal tonight.
Absolutely. Yeah, a lot of that stuff was over my head.
No, it's okay.
But
again,
interesting, though.
It's okay. Again, if anybody, I'm telling you, wanted to sit down and you had the motivation to learn even something as difficult as Japanese, you can do it. It's will take a long time. There'll be frustrating moments. You have to, you will make mistakes. But I find that when I'm speaking Hungarian and I actually do, like I make a sentence and it's all correct, you get a little reward. You give yourself a reward and it's nice. And then you keep going because you will make mistakes. And a lot of people don't like to make mistakes in language, but it's unavoidable. And especially the more difficult the language, the more you're going to make mistakes. But every time you make a mistake, you learn from it. So that's the one thing that you got to shut off when you learn the languages, you're not going to get it perfect the first time, and that's okay, but the different grammar and stuff, I know it's such a different concept. And even when I was learning it, because my family spoke Hungarian, but I never really learned grammar. I mean, we just learned conversational stuff. But when I learned it, it was like, okay, well, this is the language. Like, I can't change it. So, and then they show you all these rules and all these charts. Like, I probably have 100 pages of tables of different tenses, different cases, different everything. And eventually, I don't know what it is. Your brain just adapts, So it's difficult at first, and it becomes easier as you go along. So, so it is.
Yeah, that's excellent.
I have a question here for you, Mark, which doesn't make sense to me, but might make sense to you. So let me know. Okay. So I have a question about the ontological processes relationship in the language. Are there many embedded sugar syntax? Does that mean anything to you?
I don't know what that means.
No,
I'm
you
really
and me both
sorry.
then. You and me both.
I'm
Okay,
really
never
sorry.
mind.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, Ezra, if you could explain that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think syntax is the same as sentence structure, right? So I don't really know, or it's similar. Phonology is another. Anyway, yeah, those are big linguistic stuff. So yeah, not too sure. But word order is another thing. Again, going back to some languages like German, word order is so specific. And that's one of the easy things when you have a very strict language, even though there's a lot of rules in German. There are exceptions, but they're few and far between. As long as you know the many rules, you can get through the language. But in Hungarian, like, word order is one of those things where, like, yeah, we have word order, and sometimes I have to put words in different positions. But beyond that, you can pretty much, in most cases, make up a sentence. Like, even the sentence that I translated for you, I could put the first word last. I could start with lokation ba felmegyek. That's fine. It might emphasize and sound a little different, but it doesn't change really the meaning. So it's one of those things where that's another part of Hungarian that can be difficult because their sentence structure is just weird. It's just different. I also find when we have negatives, which is tough, because we marry our negative, which is nem, with a verb. So if I'm saying I am not, I have to say nem vagyok. But if I say I am Canadian, I have to say Kanadai vagyok. So vagyok goes at the end. But if I'm saying I am not Canadian, I have to say nem vagyok Kanadai. And that's weird sometimes. That's a mistake that you'll always get wrong because you're taught, well, no, you have to put I am last. Oh, except if it's negative, then it goes right after the negative. So it's these things that, again, through practice, these little sentence structure, annoyances kind of get better. But yeah, it is a fun language, and my hope, my wish at least, is that as I travel and I went to, when I go to Romania, I'm lucky I can maybe speak some Hungarian with some people. I have a good friend in Romania who also speaks. She's Hungarian, so we speak Hungarian. But like when I traveled to Macedonia, and there were people speaking Macedonian to me. If I had known another Slavic language, I could have communicated at some level, but I only know Hungarian, and I can't really communicate with anybody at that point. It's just not universal at all, It's too bad.
Interesting.
Cool. Well, thank you, Mark. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, as I said, I know from when I started learning Hungarian, it was online, and I started starting during the pandemic. So I started in March of 2020. I was just finishing my undergrad, and I started 1 hour a week, and then that went to 60-minute class a week, and then that eventually went to 2 60-minute classes, so twice a week, so 2 hours a week. And then when I moved here, so it was after about a year, then I did Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 9 to 12. So that was, or 9 to 1 or whatever it was. And it was about 12 hours a week in total, I guess. And then, now I just learn freely, speak to my family, and, it takes its time, but italki has been very helpful because any language you want to learn will have decent rates, and they have both professional teachers and what are called community tutors. So professional teachers will be actual teachers with degrees, and so forth, and they'll break down everything. But if you just want to have like conversations with people, you can just pick a community tutor, and that's usually what I do, especially if I feel like I'm kind of losing my Hungarian a little bit because I mostly go to school in English. I just have basic conversations with people. When I meet my family, we tend to speak Hungarian, but that's not very often. So just to speak the language, and then I read a lot, which is also a really really good way to enhance. When I watch stuff on Netflix, I use Hungarian subtitles, or I dub in Hungarian and then I read English subtitles. I find as a visual learner, that's also good, especially reading and looking at words, because then I remember them more. And then, stuff comes back. If I forget something, that's actually the most painful part sometimes is if if I'm in a quick conversation with someone and I forget a word, and then the conversation goes by and 20 minutes later I'm like, oh, I should have said this, this, and this.
Yeah.
Happens all the time, but at least
I
then
know that so
eventually
well.
remember it.
Yeah.
Yeah, eventually I remember it, which is actually good. It means you're retaining the language, but it's just hard,
That's funny.
Oh, hey, Goldie. Goldie's online. Hi.
Oh yeah.
Hey, Goldie.
Hi, Goldie. Creepy's online. Chitsa's online.
Yep.
You're welcome,
Broken
Chitsa.
dishes.
That's awesome. We got a lot of people here.
Yeah, definitely.
Malinus.
Ikarina.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions, get them in.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's. I'd be interested too, Joe, because I know you've learned a lot of languages. How have you learned most of them?
So let me think. English, I obviously learned as a child. German, I learned when I was at school, but it didn't really stick until I spent time in Germany. I also learned French at school, and that's completely gone. So that goes to show it was about making it stick. Let me see. Esperanto, I learned originally from a book which I found in my local library. And it feels really weird to talk about that experience in English because people usually ask me about that in Esperanto. So I'm kind of translating that. But yeah, so I found a book one day in my local library and I was like, hey, I've heard this language is really easy. So yeah. Let me see. Romanian, yeah, was also from a book. And at the time, I was working as a care worker with some Moldovans. So apparently my Romanian is apparently with a slight Russian accent, but so that gave me the opportunity to practice that. So that's Romanian. Let me think. Spanish, I guess, mainly from Cuban and Mexican music, but also just using it when I was in Spain or Holiday and stuff. Portuguese was Duolingo. And let me see, Duolingo and practicing with people, and Norwegian, Duolingo a little bit, and then practicing with people more. And then Farsi, the most recent one, is not Duolingo, and I'm going to keep telling them off for that until they fix it. So Farsi, I guess, mainly from music, from books, from, I don't know. I tend to be inspired to learn languages from music primarily because I'm obsessed with music, as you may have noticed. So if there's like a certain type of music I'm into that is in a certain language, like, I've been way into Cuban music for a long time, then that will tend to spur an interest. But I guess that answers your question. That's a slightly different answer for each language, but yeah.
Well, I do have one question, but before that, I want to know if anyone else who's in the audience, if you speak other languages, you can write which ones you speak and how you learn them. whether it was in
Yes,
school or
please.
apps or whatever. That would be really interesting. But for Farsi, because many years ago, about 20 years ago, when I was still living in my hometown, just before my mom moved and just before actually I moved to Europe, we had Iranian neighbors. And I mean, I don't know much Farsi other than thank you is merci, right? So, which obviously is also French. But I am
That's one of
curious about
the,
that because, yeah, one of the thank yous, of course, it's not the only
yeah.
one, but yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm curious about that because I also have friends that speak Hindi, and I know that grammar is pretty Indo-European. You know, they have very similar
Hmm.
features, but then Farsi on top of that has this completely different alphabet. I'm curious when it comes to grammar, what is this? What is the structure kind of like? Is it closer to the European languages? Do they have prepositions? Do they have, you know, all pronouns, like all that? And then how did you, or how are you learning the alphabet, if at all?
Right. So I'd say the grammar is quite Indo-European. Um, it does have some Turkic influence, but it's by and large Indo-European majority. Um, the the alphabet, or strictly speaking, abjad, is more. How can I put it? So, yeah, I learned it from books really, and just the internet and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's so the most challenging thing about it is they don't write short vowels, generally speaking. So if you like short vowels, and same in Arabic, short vowels are only written for like kids and learners and stuff. So once you get to like proper writing, air quotes, then there are no short vowels written. So you have to kind of, well, you have to kind of guess, right? And you know the word, then you kind of, you just know it. But like if but like so in Arabic and other Semitic languages such as Hebrew, they have this pattern, right, where you've got. I think I was talking about this before, where you have like a set of 3 or more consonants, and then the vowels will slot into it. And what this means is that with the Arabic abjad, you can kind of guess which are the vowels, right, for Arabic. But when you then apply that system to an Indo-European language, which doesn't have that, it kind of has a slight extra layer of complexity because you can't intuit what those vowels would be, so you just kind of have to know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's a bit of a challenge, but you kind of get there. Yeah, it's once you get the hang of it, it's not. I don't know. It's not a
Too bad,
logographic
yeah.
script, so it could be worse. You know,
Yeah.
it's not Chinese. So,
Yeah, symbols. Yeah, I could figure that out. Yeah. I'm curious with Farsi. So again, like, yeah, because I read Hebrew. I don't speak Hebrew, but I read it because of
okay.
you know, Hebrew school and stuff. So, you know, we got our consonants on top, and we have silent consonants like the aleph. And then yeah, there'll be like the consonant to the gamel or the bet or the vet or whatever, and then we usually have a series of dots or dashes that are underneath, and that is a, e, o, u, or then that's the Sephardic
Yeah.
Hebrew. If it's the Ashkenazi Hebrew, then it's like ah, not a, and all that kind of stuff. It's relatively similar. So is it similar in that way? Because I know for me, if I just have consonants, because I don't know Hebrew, if I just have the consonants, I don't know what the word means. I have to have the vowels in order to read it, which in the prayer books, they always have they always have consonants and vowels. They have to. But if I've been to Israel, so, and I've seen, by the way, because they have both Arabic that's written there, because 21% of Israelis are Arabs, and half of those are Palestinians, and half of those are Arabs, and they live there. And then they also just have Hebrew, but they have their own advertising languages, which I think is cool. So there's like an Arabic advertising language and a Hebrew advertising language, but they only use the consonants. And so for me, that's weird, right? Like for us as English, if we were to get rid of all of our vowels and we just had consonants, it wouldn't make any sense. So is it
I
similar
reckon
in
you could
that
read
way?
it.
Yeah. in Farsi? Is it similar? Yeah.
So instead of dots, right, you have like little line diacritics.
Yeah.
So a line above is an A, a short A. A line below is a short E.
Yeah.
And then like a small, I have to describe it, like a small curly thing. It's called a wow or a vav, right? Is like does you have the same in Hebrew? That if you put that above, is it above or below? I think that's above. That is there's O, right, which is considered a short vowel. And then for longer vowels, they are written. So you have again wow or vav. So this is called wow in Arabic, and vav in Farsi is the U letter, but it also means V, but it's U. And then the long A is Aleph, which is the line down. That's always written. And there, E is a Yod, I think it's called, is its own letter as well. That's always written, which is both an I and a Y sound. So yeah. But yeah, so the short vowels are written with diacritics, and much the same as you were saying about in Jewish prayer books. In Islamic prayer books, in the Quran, they will have all the diacritics are always written, because it's considered important that people can know exactly what it says. Whereas in everyday writing, they would not be written. So yeah.
Yeah, I find that fascinating how someone could just look at
It
a
takes some
group of
getting used to.
consonants, you know.
I was going to try something in the comments, and you tell me if you can understand this. Carry on.
Sure. Yeah, no, it's weird. There's certain words that I could probably guess, but again, without those vowels, like it's such an English. I mean, every Indo-European language is very similar, but it's such an English way of being like consonants without vowels, and having like a B and a D, that means bed, huh? It's like, what?
Wow.
Like, no, does it mean bad? No, it means bed. Like, again, because in Hebrew, if you had a B and a D together, that's only one word. It wouldn't be bad and bed. There'd only be one of those two or something, like that's why it makes sense. But I don't know. I find it fascinating, but again, totally different things going on here. But yeah, strange. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I do find that with different alphabets over the summer, yeah, again, like,
Yeah, it's kind of like that.
So I think you could tell me, can you read this? I think you could, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess.
So,
I mean, yeah, it's true.
Wow.
So this is just removing the short vowels, and that's how it would be written.
Okay.
So that's basically how it works.
That's pretty neat.
I guess the other level of complexity with Arabic letters, which you don't have in Hebrew letters, is that they change shape depending on where in the word they are, and things like that. So that takes some learning as well.
Yeah, gosh, I still would love to learn other alphabets. In the summer, because again, I was going to North Macedonia, I was learning Macedonian Cyrillic, and I got that pretty quickly, honestly. Like, it took about a week, and I could at least read signs and stuff. Like, that was pretty simple, because it again, that also follows, similar rules to Latin and Greek, right? It's just vowels and consonants. They just are different shapes, and I think an N and a P are different or whatever. Like, that's it, really. Like, your brain just adapts. But I've always been kind of interested in like Arabic script, Georgian, Armenian script, and then of course like anything, Hebrew, Farsi, because there's just some scripts where you look at it and you think, how can anybody read this? But obviously people do. Like Farsi.
Georgian is the most beautiful script.
Which one?
Georgian is the most beautiful script, I think.
Yeah. I would love to learn. I would also love to learn that language, but the double consonant sounds are also guttural and everything. It's not
More than
easy.
double, they have like clusters that are like 5 consonants or 6 consonants long, and you have to pronounce it somehow. Crazy language.
Wow.
Yeah.
But that's really cool. But yeah, just briefly for my languages. So I grew up obviously speaking English. That's my first language. But in my home, my mom spoke Macedonian. That's her first language. And then my grandparents' first language was Macedonian. And they speak a dialect. So they don't speak the standardized version. They speak the dialect of what was called West Macedonian. And it's like a very particular dialect that nobody really speaks anymore because most people are older and it's not the standardized version. And then my dad and my grandparents spoke Hungarian. We also had family that spoke Spanish, and I learned Spanish as a kid when we would go to Cuba. Went to Cuba a couple Christmases, like 5 Christmases in a row. I think I was between 5 and 10 years old. So to keep us occupied during the day, they give us Spanish lessons. In school, French, and then high school German. And then when I was 22, I moved here to Europe. And I learned Polish. I learned German again. And then in the interim years, I've taken courses again in Italian, French again. I tried American Sign Language. And then, of course, Romanian and Hungarian. And then reading Hebrew, which also came when I was in my mid-20s. So yeah, I like yourself. Like I love languages. I wish I could learn more. I wish I could retain. That's the biggest problem. Every time I feel like I'm learning Romanian, I'm forgetting stuff in Hungarian and vice versa. So I struggle with that. And even though it's 2 languages, I have to sort of stop learning other things. And I still remember stuff in Polish. I think it was also last year summer, I went to Krakow. And I still remembered the phrases that I used every day in Polish. Even though I don't speak Polish, I still remembered hello, how are you, thank you, all that kind of stuff. So that stuff sticks with you. I really, really wish because for me, Romanian is not very difficult, but it's hard to remember because, again, practice. Like I don't really have too many people to practice with, whereas Hungarian, I can practice every day. So I remember a lot more of it now. But I think that's one of those things where the internet helps. And again, like websites like italki and Duolingo, at least you can still learn. If you can't find a speaker in your community, you can always find one online, which is fantastic. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot of languages, but my maternal grandfather spoke, he spoke Macedonian, he spoke Romanian, he spoke Greek, Russian, and Turkish. And then my other grandfather spoke Hungarian, German, Russian, and maybe a few others, French, so yeah, it's just I admire people who can at least speak 2 languages, if not more. And even if you can't speak a second language fluently, if you're learning or if you're trying, because I know in speaking English, it's very easy for us to just speak English, which I understand because it's the universal language. And in some communities, you don't need to have another language, and that's totally okay too. But yeah, if you've tried something in school, I know many Americans will speak Spanish to learn that in school, and it's nice. It's nice to try to remember. And again, even if you are monolingual, it's also okay too. Like that, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's just I think it's interesting for certain people, and I know that again, languages can be hard. It depends on how people think and how people learn. So it's not exactly the easiest thing, but it's just nice. It's just interesting if you have a different interest in different cultures, especially. Language helps as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But Chad, do you have any questions, Chad? Was there anything started or anything like that?
I think, and I know why there's so many different languages and stuff, but I still find it fascinating that there's so many different languages, And then like I think you're hinting at, it's different when you take a language from Europe and bring it to South America. It's a different variant, and that's very interesting too, that the people localize it. And even with like North America, well, the United States with the North and like the Southern states have different variants of words, and that stuff is definitely fascinating to me. You know how you say
Yeah.
just like the old one where well, I don't really have a good example, but like tomato. You might say it different if you're in the north or the south of somewhere.
I have a question from my channel. Do any of us speak a dead language? I guess you could say Esperanto is maybe if I want to be harsh. Mark, do you?
A dead language. I mean, I can only say with my ancestors. I had ancestors that spoke Yiddish and Ladino, and those are endangered languages.
Wow.
If we go back far enough, we all speak a dead language like Latin.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, even Hebrew was a dead language until 1948. So I guess some of my ancestors spoke that too. Yeah, I guess it depends on how far back we want to go. I would say endangered languages are interesting too, because that's another thing that I kind of forgot to mention was if when we look at the landscape of Uralic languages, really 3 of them are doing well. So Hungarian, 14 million speakers, 5 million people speak Finnish. Around 4 million in Finland, and then 1 million elsewhere, and then 1.1 million people speak Estonian, and that's 1 million in Estonia and 100,000 outside. But all those other languages, Sami, Komi, Mansi, everyone else is not doing very well, unfortunately. Some of those languages are extinct as first languages, and they're going on by a thread as a second language. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that most young people under the age of 40 or 45 are speaking Russian, and that a lot of languages in Russia are being displaced. So there are Uralic languages where you might find like 5 elderly people in a village somewhere who speak that one language and that's their first language, or you might find no first language speakers, but 20 people that have it as a second language, but they don't use it every day. So there's a statistic that right in the world today, right now, in 2023, there's probably approximately somewhere around 6,000 different languages. But by the year 2100, there's probably only going to be 600 languages. So that means that most of those Uralic languages that I mentioned, there's about 38 in total, probably they're all going to be extinct except for Hungarian, Estonian, and Finnish. And also indigenous languages in North South America are going kind of underground, but there are a few of them like Quechua is doing really well right now. But there is a lot in North America, especially on reserve and reservation lands, that it's hard to learn. And, if you want to learn, you have to be a part of the reservation, a part of the nation, or part of the reserve land. And so, yeah, it's unfortunate. It really is sad. But what I think is a positive about this is with the internet, you can go on to websites like Wikitongues, and you can hear people speak all different types of languages, like from all over the world, and many of them are endangered. So at least there'll be some record of those languages, unlike previous, where when a language went extinct, it was gone forever. At least there'll be some documentation. So in the future, if someone wants to revive the language, we'll at least have some evidence and something to go on. So, but that is one of those sad things. There's Romanian that is spoken in Croatia called Istro-Romanian, and they're endangered. They're probably going to be extinct somewhat soon in the next 20, 30 years. There's another language called Istriot, which is also spoken in Croatian. Maybe 80 old men who fish in Pula and Rovinja, and that'll be extinct. But again, they're all online, and they all have these institutes that are documenting their vocabulary, their grammar, their literature and libraries. So, they won't be completely gone, even though people won't be speaking it every day. So good and bad, there's all that kind of stuff going on.
Yeah, that's definitely good that they're putting it online for sure.
Yeah.
There's been attempts at reviving ones as well, like Cornish, for instance, here in the UK. There's been an attempt to revive that, so
how is that
could happen, but who knows?
How is that going with Cornish?
I don't know personally. How's it? Yeah, so my understanding is that there's like some second language speakers, but not many. Maybe I should look it up. Give me a second.
Well, even Irish Gaelic is kind of going through, because I know in Ireland, I think everyone learns Gaelic as a second language, right? And there's only a few people who actually speak it as a first language on the coast. But at least that is something that could have been gone with the whole, with the terror, the horrors and the terror and all that kind of stuff. Like, I mean, from 1916. And then Gaelic itself is, yeah, it's a symbol of Irish, freedom and all that kind of stuff. So I think they're doing pretty okay in some sense, at least from L2 speakers. But you're right. Like, I know Manx is another one that kind of is around, and the Jersey language, like those island languages are kind of okay, but a lot of people move from those places to the mainland and then they just don't speak it anymore. So, yeah. But Cornish. Yeah.
Okay, I have an answer here. As of the 2021 census, there are 557 second language speakers of Cornish.
Well, it's not bad. I mean,
so there we
that's
are.
Not too bad. Honestly, that's better than a lot of Uralic languages that have, 5 old women, unfortunately, So that's okay. I mean, maybe it won't get up to a Gaelic level, but I think for the people that are Cornish and who find that to be part of their heritage, like that's something that they're doing that at least is good and meaningful to them. So who knows, right? But you're right, language revivals. Turkish was revived. It was purged of the of the Ottoman words and reconstructed by Mustafa Kemal, and it's a relatively new language. Hebrew came back. Latin, kind of, I mean, they speak Latin in the church and stuff, but whatever. Like, there are Latin scholars. Like, who knows, that might make an appearance. But yeah, and a lot of indigenous languages have gone through a revival. So I hope they don't all just get extinct and we're all just speaking, European languages. But who knows, right? Like, it's hard to say.
Absolutely.
But yeah, but that's Hungarian. It's a weird little language that is very strange. Doesn't make much sense. And every Hungarian teacher, good Hungarian teachers, which there are many of them, and I had very good Hungarian teachers, are very, very sympathetic because they know it's hard. And I even have spoken to speakers of Arabic. And of course, Arabic for English speakers is one of the hardest languages in the world to learn. And even Arabic speakers think that Hungarian is hard. Wow. And Thai speakers and Mandarin speakers with their tones, and Vietnamese has tones, and tonal languages, again, are things I can't even grasp my head around. They say Hungarian is hard.
Same.
So, yeah, I don't know. Bad enough, right? I couldn't even imagine. Do you speak any tonal languages, or have you learned any tonal languages, Joe?
No,
yeah.
No. Not a chance. No? Maybe one day.
Yeah. Thai or Vietnamese, I don't know. Maybe Vietnamese sounds interesting. Mandarin. Mandarin will, I think, be one of the languages of the future, of course. Standardized.
Yep.
Standardized kind of Mandarin from China will be pretty much on point in many ways with English, although English is much easier to learn for most people. So that's why it's probably going to be more spread out. But man, yeah. But yeah, Korean, yeah, very strange language, but interesting topic. Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. And, again, like, I just find out with languages, it's so cool. Like, I don't know, if you live in a big city, no matter where you are, you can always find people who speak another language. I know if you have access where you're just going out in public to supermarkets or you're on public transportation or you go to work and you just hear a different language. I always try to think, oh, what is that language? Like, can I guess it? What is it?
Yeah, I do that too. I think that must be a language nerd thing. Right?
Yeah.
That's right.
It is, but yeah, it's pretty fun, and yeah, again, it's one of these weird things, it's a strange phenomenon, Hungarian. And the other thing is a lot of scholars tried to place Hungarian and the Huns together. And that's one of those things where it's just kind of a myth. There's no evidence. But when we Hungarians, when the Magyars came into Hungary, like the Greeks, the Byzantines and stuff, they kind of identified us as being Huns because I guess they didn't have any other way of knowing who we were, but we aren't. But that's still a highly contested debate in Hungary. But we aren't. We're not Huns because that's another interesting thing is that the Huns themselves, nobody knows what language they spoke. So they could have spoke a Mongolic language, a Turkic language, a Uralic language. It could have been Iranian. It could have been Caucasian. Like nobody knows. And so, maybe one day people will find out. I think that would be kind of cool if people could, but who knows? So until then, it's a mystery.
The Huns were in MLM, right?
I'm sorry?
The Huns are MLM, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, who knows, right? But anyway, I find it fascinating, and the world is an interesting place full of interesting stuff, and I hope if you have access to living in bigger cities, another thing that's really cool to engage in culture, of course, is to go to different restaurants, community centers, engage with people, and I love I had a professor from Nigeria, and he introduced me to Nigerian food, which is like fantastic. I love it. I love food from all over the world. It's so delicious. And in Hungary, we've of course got our heavy schnitzels, and we have our goulash and pastries and everything. But yeah, it's again a little bit different from how our neighbors make their foods because we use spices, which is something Germans don't like. They don't enjoy their spice.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Exactly. Yeah. Some German food can be bland, but in Hungary we use hot paprika or sweet paprika, so we like the spices. Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's another thing that does fascinate me. Same with languages. How all the languages are different. How all cultures have slightly different, or more than slightly different food patterns. Even from like say Buffalo, New York to the South, it's different.
Yep.
You know what I mean? It's just fascinating. I don't know why, but it is.
Yeah, you guys got a lot of the Midwestern food, but then you have your own particular things, and then down south they have their own stuff too, right? Like southern United States is great for barbecue and stuff like that, whereas in the north it's mostly like hoagies and wings and stuff like. Yeah, and in England it must be the same. I'm sure English food I know doesn't get a good rap, but there are some English food I do enjoy. I am a toast and beans type person. I do enjoy that.
Sorry to interrupt you, Mark. In the movies, they always say like the stereotype is always fish and chips.
Yeah, that's the best. But yeah, Marmite and Vegemite are not my thing. But I will do toast and beans. And I do like kippers. I find them to be quite tasty, personally. That's from growing up in Canada.
You lost me at kippers. I was good until then.
Are those like sardines?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like fish.
They're like smoked fish of some sort. Not sure what kind.
I like sardines.
Yeah. It's like a smoked. It can be whatever, mackerel or something like that. We have that here too, that kind of thing. But I don't know. When I've only been in England once. Only been to London, and then I cut little bits of the countryside. Don't like London, but that's me. I also went to St. Hill, which is the whole other story. But I did go to Brighton, which was actually quite nice. I'd like to go north, but I didn't find the food too bad, especially when there's a lot of Indian food. A lot of curry in England. This is great. But even in Canada, we're very lucky with that. And even in Hungary, it's not as good. Like I love Indian food. It's not as good here, but in Toronto, Indian food is pretty fantastic. So I'm a sucker for that stuff.
That's cool.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you guys have any other questions, but again, thank you so much, for everything. And I'm going to put this into parts throughout the week, and I'll clip some stuff out. And then next week we'll talk about it. Yeah, exactly. And next week we can talk about it on our chat. For next thing, I could do maybe something on Romanian, or actually, Joe, if you have anything too, might be fun to do a history of something. If you'd
Yeah,
like, if not,
definitely.
we'll,
I did a series during the time in 2019 that we're not going to talk about, which was about musical instrument collections in different museums that I've been to. So if that would interest people, then please let me know in the chat. That's something we could do.
perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
that's great.
Well, yeah, guys.
and
Thanks
obviously,
so much.
I'm happy to talk. And obviously, I'm happy to talk about any languages or music or anything else that people would. But yeah.
Very good.
Anyway,
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Well, yeah, thank you
Yeah,
again,
that's great.
Corinne. Appreciate it, and glad everyone hope everyone enjoyed it again, and just stay tuned to our channels.
Very much so.
Get us our watch hours, and appreciate Chad for also hosting us. And yeah, I guess we'll be back
That's
next
great,
week.
guys.
Yeah. All right. Thanks very much, Mark.
Yeah.
All right,
See you guys.
Mark.
Thanks,
See you
Chad.
guys. Thanks,
Take care,
you guys.
everyone. Bye.
Bye now.